Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
I turned 30 this spring, but I remember that night like it just happened. June 3rd, my 18th birthday. I was standing on the back deck in the dark, while my twin brother Grant held up a shiny Audi key fob in front of 160-something people crammed into our parents' house like it was his damn coronation. Inside, the music was blasting, seafood towers on ice, people laughing under string lights some planner from Newport had hung up that morning. The DJ booth had a big vinyl banner with Grant at 18 in gold letters. My name, not even in the fine print. Mom, Lydia, if you want to know, had told me to stay upstairs so I wouldn't get overwhelmed, like I was a dog scared of thunder or something. She patted my arm and said, "You know how crowds get to you," which was her favorite excuse when she didn't feel like explaining me to people. That was her tone all spring. For 5 months, there were meetings at our dining table with florists and food vendors and sound guys. I kept waiting for her to turn to me and say, "Now, what about Mason's side of the party?" But it never came. Dad, Nolan, would just wave it off with, "We'll sort Mason's thing later," like I was a scheduling error. The week before, I'd found the Audi in the garage under a Navy tarp. I asked Dad what it was doing there. He said Grant needed it for summer internships and barked some crap about logistics. Yeah, right. They wrapped it like a gift and parked it right next to my future like I was supposed to applaud. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. I showed up in the stairwell around 6, wearing the only decent shirt I owned, and that's when Mom blocked me like a bouncer. "Please don't make tonight complicated," she said. I stared at her. "It's my birthday too," I said. No yelling, no drama, just the truth. She didn't even blink, just stepped back like I'd said something dirty. Dad walked up behind her with that tight-jawed look he used when he wanted me to shut up without saying it out loud. So I stood in the kitchen doorway while Grant worked the room like a damn senator. He was shaking hands with our old Little League coach, laughing with the neighbor who never remembered my name. Dad made a big show of lifting the keys like it was some kind of surprise, and the crowd went wild. Grant didn't even look at me. Or if he did, he looked past me. That was the part that burned. We shared a room for 17 years. He knew every bad habit I had, every dream I kept under my mattress. And still, nothing. I turned around and walked back upstairs without a word. I packed a backpack with what little I had. An acceptance packet to a metalworking apprenticeship in Pittsburgh, $129 mowing lawns and fixing fences, and a folded bus schedule I'd picked up, just in case. Around 8:40, the DJ hit that awful remix Grant loved. I waited until they were mid-cheer, then slipped out the side gate. No one saw. No one called my name. The yard lights didn't even flicker. The bus left Providence at 10:35 p.m. I sat at the station and kept my phone on loud, expecting at least one text, one call, someone realizing I was gone. At 1:12 a.m., already halfway across Massachusetts, my screen finally lit up. It was from Grant. He wrote, "Mom says you're being dramatic. Where are you?" I looked at it, powered my phone off, and didn't turn it back on for a long, long time. The terminal smelled like bleach and vending machine grease. I had a hoodie rolled up for a pillow and a duffel bag under my legs. By the time the bus pulled into Pittsburgh, the sun was already crawling up the side of a half-demolished building near the highway, and I had a headache from sleeping in half-sits. I didn't know a single person in that city. That was the whole point. Royce, the guy who ran the apprenticeship, picked up my call on the second ring 3 weeks before. Said, "If you're not afraid of heat and don't whine, I've got space." I figured that was the best deal I'd get. He gave me a cot in the back room of his shop. It smelled like burnt metal, sweat, and coffee that had been microwaved 4 times too many. The floor creaked and the cot sagged, but I didn't care. I didn't need comfort. I needed out. First thing he handed me was a pair of gloves and a mask, and pointed to a table, saw that looked older than me. I faked confidence and got to work. 3 hours in, I brushed the side of a metal sheet too soon after the torch and scorched the skin clean off 2 fingers. I wrapped it in a rag from the bathroom, said nothing, and bled through my glove all afternoon. Royce noticed around 6. "Burned it, didn't you?" I nodded. He didn't ask for details. He just said, "Now you know what rushing gets you." First rule, you can lie all you want, but your hands tell the truth. Then he walked away. I slept that night with my hand in a bowl of lukewarm water, praying it wouldn't get infected. I didn't cry. I was too tired. We worked in that shop from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., sometimes later. Royce pointed at a stack of reclaimed beams the second day and said, "Turn that into 3 tables by Friday. They don't have to be pretty, just strong enough to take a hit." That was it. No instructions, no measurements. Just figure it out. I'd eat whatever I could afford, usually gas station sandwiches or dollar ramen from the discount store down the street. I learned to boil water on a rusted hot plate that sparked if I plugged in the fan at the same time. But the work made sense. Every cut, every weld, every clamp had a point. There was no pretending. Nobody could erase a table after it was done. It existed. It held weight. It mattered. That was more than I could say about most of my life. Nights, I'd stay late and clean. Sometimes I'd mess around with scrap, just shaping it to see what it could be. I started posting grainy pictures of weld seams and grinder sparks on a new Instagram I made under a fake name. Mason Ryder. It was the name of some forgotten backup catcher on an old AAA team. Not famous enough to matter, not close enough to hail for anyone back home to find me. The account didn't get followers. That wasn't the point. It was proof I was doing something. There was a dive bar on the corner of Penn and 23rd where a bartender named Tessa worked Monday nights. She had black curls tied up with a pen and a way of sizing people up in 2 seconds. She caught me watching the jukebox one night and said, "You working or stealing?" I told her I could wipe tables if she needed help. She said, "You break a glass, you pay for it," then tossed me a rag. After the shift, she handed me a burger and said, "Next time, eat before you pass out on my floor." I stuck to the shadows. Didn't tell the guys at the shop about Grant. Didn't tell them I'd left home with a duffel bag and a bus ticket. I let them think I was just another broke 18-year-old with calloused hands and something to prove. About 3 weeks in, I was sweeping up late one night, and I saw this older guy helping his kid use the drill press. The boy couldn't have been older than 10. The dad showed him how to line up the bit, slow and careful, hand over hand. The kid kept messing it up, but the dad never raised his voice, just tried again. I stood there with my broom, pretending to watch the corner, and something cracked open in my chest. Not in a poetic way, just like a door I'd never walked through before. I realized right then I wasn't going back. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. If they wanted me, they could come find me. The next morning, I walked into a post office and filed a change of address form. After that, I took a bus across town to the courthouse, waited in line for 2 hours, and filled out the paperwork to change my last name. When I signed the form, it hit me like a brand, Ryder. That name didn't carry their decisions, their shame, their edits. It was mine. Later that night, Tessa saw the bandage on my hand from the burn and asked what happened. I said, I stopped lying to myself. She just nodded and refilled my glass. I didn't throw a fit, didn't post a speech, didn't even tell Royce. I just stopped answering to Hale. From then on, I was Mason Ryder. Full stop. Not hiding. Just cutting off the part that didn't belong anymore. And that's how I started over. One cot, one burn, one name that finally fit. The shop heat didn't bother me anymore. My hands had toughened up. Nerves dulled under layers of scar tissue and callus. I didn't flinch when the sparks hit my forearms or when the grinder slipped and kissed my knuckle. The rhythm of the work, cut, weld, grind, finish, got in my bones like music. It beat thinking about June 3rd. Royce didn't hand out compliments. What he handed out was sandpaper and second chances. "That seems ugly," he said one morning, pointing with a coffee mug that had metal dust caked to the handle. "Grind it down." "Do it again," I didn't argue. I liked that he didn't give a damn about my past. He didn't care about names or birthdays or why I sometimes worked like I was being chased. He only cared that I did it right. That was the relief. There were no performance reviews, just results. After shifts, I started sticking around to mess with the scrap pile. Bent rebar turned into a coat rack. A busted oak board got cleaned up and became a bench. I found an old lampshade frame in the alley and rewrapped it with copper wire until it looked like something worth keeping. One night, a chef from the pizza place down the block saw the bench while picking up an order from the bar next door. "You make that?" he asked, squinting at the welds. "Yeah," I said. "Used to be part of a shipping pallet." "You take orders?" I told him I did. That was a lie at the time, but I figured I could start now. He needed 6 stools for his new bar concept. I said sure, and spent that night Googling weight distribution and seat height like I was cramming for a final. Royce let me use the shop off hours as long as I cleaned up after. I built the first stool with my fingers crossed and the second with confidence. By the third, I actually knew what I was doing. I didn't have a real camera, so I borrowed a guy's cracked Android from the mill and took pictures against the cinder block wall out back. I built a free site that looked like hell on mobile but had a clear tagline: "I make things that last. If you sit on it, it won't break." I didn't list a last name. Just Ryder. Tessa started coming by after her shifts. We'd sit outside on milk crates while she smoked, and I scraped glue off my boots. "My brother's in the Army," she said once. "Says metal shop saved his life in high school. You ever do time?" "No," I said, "but I know what it feels like to be locked out." She nodded and passed me a leftover quesadilla wrapped in foil. "You should teach kids. You look less angry when you're explaining stuff." I moved into a room in a shared house with 2 guys from the mill. One snored loud enough to rattle the pipes. The other cooked chili that could kill a man. I learned to sleep through both. The place was loud, but it was mine. I paid rent with my own hands. Word started to spread. Someone's aunt needed a shelf. A mechanic wanted a tool bench. A couple asked if I could build a backyard gate. They argued the whole time I was measuring their posts, but they still paid in full. The biggest shift came from a woman named Miss Delgado. She ran a community center nearby and stopped by the shop after seeing my name on the stools at the pizza place. "You Ryder?" she asked, looking me up and down like she expected me to lie. "Yeah. What's up? You any good with kids?" "I don't know," I said. "Never had one." "Never been one, really?" She cracked a grin. "Cute. I need someone to show 3 boys how to use hand tools. No power stuff. Just basics. You free Saturdays?" I said yes. She didn't ask for a resume, just gave me a time and an address. That Saturday, I walked into the center's basement with a tape measure and a box of tools. The room had 3 folding tables and a water cooler that dripped like it was nervous. The kids were rough around the edges. One wouldn't stop pacing. Another tried to measure his shoelaces, but the third, Noah, had hands like mine. He gripped the saw too tight, but when I showed him how to ease off and let the weight do the work, he nodded slow like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to say that. By the end of the hour, he looked up and said, "Thanks, mister. Ryder." That hit harder than I expected. Not the thanks, the name. He said it like I was real. Orders picked up after that. A dentist asked for a coffee table. A woman wanted a storage bench that could hold her divorce files. Everyone had a story. I just kept building. I didn't post any of it where my family could see. Didn't check if Grant had graduated college or moved to some fancy zip code. I didn't care. Every time I finished something and handed it over, it was another piece of proof that I wasn't just surviving. I was making something that couldn't be deleted. On my 21st, I didn't throw a party. I ate a cold slice of pepperoni on the shop steps at midnight, wiped grease off my pants, and thought, I'm still here. That was enough. The clerk called out, "Mason Ryder," and I stood up like that name had always been mine. No hesitation, no pause. I didn't stumble over it or check if anyone else answered. I said, "Here," signed where they told me, and walked out of that courthouse lighter than I'd felt in years. I didn't celebrate. I just sat on a bench across the street with a stale bagel and let the silence sink in. That same week, I rode a cheap bus to Providence with 2 duffels and a dream bigger than what I could afford. Pittsburgh had been good for the start, but I needed more room, more orders, more distance from everything tied to the name I dropped. I filed my business paperwork at City Hall under Ryder Forge and Wood. Sounded like something a guy with a toolbox and a busted back would say out loud without cringing. The lady behind the desk asked if I had a location. I gave her the address of the garage bay I hadn't signed for yet and prayed it wouldn't fall through. It didn't. Mrs. Keene, the landlord, was in her 70s, wore paint-splattered cardigans, and had 0 tolerance for charm. She pointed at the concrete floor and said, "You wreck it, you fix it." "Don't call me crying when it leaks," I said. "I don't cry, but I fix things." And she handed me a key on a plastic fob with some guy's name on it, Troy something. "He died," she said. "Try not to." A few weeks later, Tessa relocated to Rhode Island to help an aunt in Pawtucket and picked up shifts at a bar in Providence. We kept in touch and she started swinging by the garage with coffee after her morning runs. I scrubbed the place top to bottom, spent 2 weeks scouring auctions, flea markets, and garage sales for tools, found an old man out in Warwick selling off his whole workshop after a back injury. He made me promise I'd sharpen every blade and not be an idiot with the lathe. I promised. He gave me a hand plane he said he'd used on his daughter's crib. The first month nearly wrecked me. A wedding venue ordered 30 chairs and didn't pay on time. I had rent due and nothing but sawdust in my pockets. I called them every day until I was blue in the face. On day 21, I showed up with a borrowed dolly and said, "I'll be taking my chairs back." That got their attention. The check cleared the next morning. Lesson learned. Take deposits or take a loss. Never both. One afternoon, this kid kept hovering near the roll-up door. Looked about 15, skinny, scuffed backpack, hoodie 2 sizes too big. I asked if he was lost. He said, "I like watching sparks." Next day he came back and swept without asking. His name was Eli. I didn't ask too many questions, just put a broom in his hand, tossed him a slice, and said, "You show up on time, I'll show you how to sand." He started coming after school. We didn't make it official. I paid him under the table and taught him like someone should have taught me. A couple months in, a local reporter doing a piece on makers asked if they could swing by. I said sure. They snapped a picture of me standing with my arms crossed in front of the garage, eyes squinting against the sun, jaw clenched like I was mad at gravity. I looked tougher than I felt. Orders started picking up. A brewery wanted 5 long tables. A realtor needed a statement door for a house she was flipping. I told her I could make it look like it belonged to someone who actually lived there. She laughed and gave me a deposit on the spot. I pulled 2 all-nighters that week, slept on a folded blanket next to the drill press, boots still on, fingers numb. Tessa showed up Saturday morning, holding coffee and a breakfast sandwich. She took one look at me and said, "You look like you've been dragged behind a truck." I said, "I needed the work." She sat on a stool and handed me the sandwich. "You need breathing room. One big job, something that buys you a week to sleep." I nodded but didn't say anything. She already knew. We sat in silence while I ate. Later that night, I saw a flyer from the New Hope Children's Center. They were building a new rehabilitation wing in Providence and needed proposals for a hands-on creative space. Metal, wood, low-risk tools, stuff kids in wheelchairs could reach. It didn't say how big the budget was, just said, "Seeking builders with experience and vision." I sat at my shop desk for an hour staring at the screen. Then I started typing. No fluff, no buzzwords. I wrote like I talk, told them I could build a space where kids could work without being babied. I said, "I believe kids can build things that last if you give them tools that don't insult their intelligence." I included a sketch, some rough costs, a note about using reclaimed materials so the space would have stories in the walls. I even threw in a bullet about Eli helping. Said I had first-hand experience teaching someone who didn't come from much. The budget number I asked for made me sweat. I stared at it 10 minutes before hitting send. Tessa read it over my shoulder and said, "If you don't aim high, you're just sanding scrap." I submitted it Sunday night. No backup plan. If they passed, I'd still have brewery orders and realtor drama and a teenager who showed up like clockwork sweeping before I even opened the door. But if they said yes, I'd get to build something that couldn't be taken away. A place with bolts and benches and room to breathe. 3 weeks after I hit send on the proposal, I got a voicemail from New Hope. A woman named Carla said, "You've made it to the final 3. We'd like a walkthrough with the team next week." The team was me and Eli, who was still learning not to hold nails in his mouth. I told him we needed to look official. He said, "I've got church shoes." And we went to a hardware store and borrowed 2 hard hats by sweet-talking the floor manager into thinking we were with an internship program. We showed up early, nerves in my throat, sweat down my back. Carla met us at the side entrance and introduced us to the board. 5 people in polished shoes and polite smiles. I spoke plain. I said what I meant. I talked about strength and safety and how design can include kids without wrapping them in bubble wrap. I pointed to where I'd put a raised work table for wheelchairs, a tool wall with real names, a station for sanding blocks where you couldn't skin your knuckles even if you tried. I said, if a kid comes in feeling small, they should leave feeling strong. Afterwards, they shook my hand, said they'd be in touch. I stepped into the alley, legs like jelly, and sat on a busted milk crate behind the loading door. I don't remember breathing. 2 days later, I got the call. They picked me. Not one of those quiet, polite wins. I jumped in the air like a damn idiot and spun in a circle. Then I called Tessa. She picked up and I yelled, "They said yes!" She screamed so loud, a guy walking by clapped without knowing why. That night, she brought gas station cake with melted frosting and a bottle of something cheap in a paper bag. We toasted in paper cups on the shop floor. The budget was real money. Not Fantasyland numbers, but enough to finally pay Eli, get a panel saw that didn't sound like a dying animal, and maybe, if I squeezed it, cover rent 2 months ahead. I mapped out the phases, pulled in a friend of Royce's for the electric work, and got to building. I worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week. Eli showed up like clockwork, even when his eyes were red from whatever hell school was giving him. Then, middle of week 3, this letter shows up. No logo, no frills, just a white envelope with a thin slip inside from a bank I didn't recognize. Your business line of credit is past due. Account under. Mason Hale. Consulting. At first, I laughed. Thought it was junk. Spam, maybe. Then I saw my birth date and the last 4 digits of my social. My stomach dropped. I called the number on the letter. A guy answered in a bored voice, ran through the info like he was reading off a diner menu. These charges go back about 8 years. Event services, venue rentals, a transportation company out of Newport, a private club in New York. I cut him off. I didn't open this account. He said, "Well, someone did. You're the name on the file." I hung up, sat down on the cold shop floor, back against a crate, and stared at the wall like it might give me a better answer than what was spinning in my head. Tessa found me like that 20 minutes later. She crouched down, saw the letter on the floor, read enough to get the picture. She said one word: fight. Next morning, I looked up a lawyer with no nonsense in her face. Her name was Denise Kerr. She wore boots, not heels, and had a voice that didn't rise even when the room got tense. I liked her instantly. She asked for everything: letters, credit pulls, ID history. She said, "You've got a case if you want to take it nuclear." This wasn't sloppy. It was calculated. She walked me through how identity theft cases worked. She talked about affidavits and filings the way I talked about welds and thread counts. We weren't friends. We were a team with a mission. Meanwhile, I kept building. I didn't miss a single day at New Hope. Didn't let them see the cracks. When my hands shook from paperwork stress, I held the sander longer. When I wanted to yell, I hammered until the stud stopped moving. Every time I looked at the blueprints, I reminded myself this place was going to outlast the garbage behind me. I built every surface like it might save a life one day. Maybe it would. We hit our last inspection the day before the soft opening. I cleaned every inch of the workroom with Eli, who was proud enough to wear a shirt with my logo on it for the first time. When the donors and board folks walked in, I stayed off to the side. Let them soak it in. Carla pulled me aside near the end. She looked at the tables, the tool racks, the wall with cubbies labeled with first names only. She said, "This is going to outlast all of us." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. That line stuck with me. Outlast all of us. Yeah, that sounded right. Denise called 2 hours later. She had records. The charges on that line of credit? They lined up exactly with Grant's graduation weekend. The hotel, the catering company, the private transportation. Also matched a winter gala my mom used to post about every year like she was auditioning for a reality show. The receipts weren't subtle. They didn't even try to hide it. They used my social, my name, Mason Hale. I hadn't gone by that name in years, but it followed me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I didn't stop working. Couldn't. The kids were coming in a few weeks. I finished building the final workbench with sweat running down my back, Denise on speakerphone walking me through what to expect if we pressed charges. Tessa came by late with 2 sandwiches and a beer. She sat across from me at the paint-splattered table and said, "If you ever want to burn the whole damn thing down, just say the word." I smiled for the first time in 2 days. "Let's finish the build first." She raised her bottle. "Then we fight." Carla cornered me after a morning session with the kids and asked if I'd consider anchoring a matching campaign for the new studio wing. Said they wanted to finish strong, get more tools, fund weekend classes, maybe even start a youth training program if they raised enough. Then she added, "We'd put your name on the wall." I laughed. I really laughed. The idea that my name could sit in a children's hospital like it belonged there, it was too much. I told her I'd think about it, but deep down I figured the math wouldn't work. Then a check showed up from a contractor I'd helped on a stair job a year earlier. He landed a 6-figure city bid off the work, and out of nowhere he dropped $5,000 in my mailbox as a thank you. A day later, the brewery paid their invoice. On time, in full, no excuses. That never happened. And then a staircase contract I thought I lost came through. Same week, a small foundation reached out after the newspaper piece. Said they'd been watching my shop and wanted to support kids who work better with their hands than their mouths. Their words, not mine. I sat down that Friday and ran the numbers. Slowly. Twice. It scared me, but it was doable. I called Carla Monday morning. Told her I'd do it. On my terms. I'd commit $100,000 over 4 years if the community matched it. I'd also donate tools, labor, and instruction hours worth another $200,000, but only if we used it to set up a real training program for teens with rough starts. Not a summer camp. A real track that taught trade basics and gave them a shot. She didn't answer right away, just sat there at the work table with her fingers pressed to her mouth. Then she said, "We've never had someone come in here and offer that much from the ground up." I said, "It's not a gift. It's an investment. Just don't let anyone screw it up." She asked how I wanted my name listed on the donor wall. I said, "Ryder. Just Ryder. Leave the rest dead." I signed the papers with Denise there, just to make sure nothing could come back later. Everything in black and white. Mason Ryder. No hail. No trailing ghosts. When the wing opened for press day, it hit harder than I expected. Eli was in a clean shirt, showing a little girl how to sand the edge of a pine block without stripping the skin off her thumb. Carla walked a group of local officials past the metal stations, pointing out each one like they were exhibits. A guy from Channel 7 filmed the tour. I mostly stayed in the back, but when they unveiled the plaque, I stepped forward. It was clean, brushed steel, black letters, the Ryder Studio for Hands-On Healing. Underneath, in smaller type, donated by a builder who once learned to work with his hands after a hard start. That line nearly took my knees out. I nodded to Carla, stepped back, and tried not to make a face for the cameras. Next day, the photos hit the papers. One even made a regional blog that covered nonprofit funding. They used a shot of me in the corner, arms crossed, half smile like I didn't quite believe it either. I didn't think much of it until my shop phone started buzzing like a smoke alarm. Unknown numbers, old area codes from back home, voicemails with no message. Then came the email. Subject: "Is that you? Please call me. From Grant Hale." I stared at it for a full minute. Then I hit delete. A day later, Denise called. Her voice was tight. Your parents' attorney reached out. They want to meet, I said. Absolutely not. They can show up at your shop anyway, she warned. You run a public-facing business now. We can be ready if they do, I said. Let them come. I've got nothing to hide. 2 days later, they did just that. They showed up at New Hope during a weekday tour, like it was nothing, like they were dropping in for tea. Mom walked ahead like she belonged there, wearing a tailored blazer I'd seen in an old gala photo. She looked smaller than I remembered, but sharper too, like a knife that lost weight but not edge. Dad followed behind her, stiff, thin, in some expensive coat that hung on his frame like it used to belong to someone better fed. Grant trailed behind, heavier, buzz cut, eyes everywhere but on me. I was by the cubbies, folding aprons for the afternoon session. I looked up, didn't flinch. What do you want? I asked. Mom stepped forward first. We were hoping for a conversation. I nodded toward the exit. Wrong place. Wrong time, Dad tried the smooth tone. We just want to understand how this all happened. You mean how I built something without you? I said. Easy. I started working. Grant looked like he wanted to speak but didn't. I didn't give him room. You all showed up to a kids' rehab wing with cameras running. Did you even stop to ask if that was appropriate? Mom said. We didn't know how else to reach you. That's funny, I said. You seemed pretty good at ignoring me before. She winced, just barely. I caught it. She didn't deny it. Carla came up behind me, brows raised. I gave her a small nod. She stayed close, didn't interrupt. Mom looked around the studio like it was a museum exhibit. Her voice softened. It's beautiful, Mason. It's Ryder, I said. Grant finally looked at me. We need to talk. No, I said. You need to listen. 12 years after the night they erased me, there we were, face to face inside the walls I built. Mom opened her mouth first. We're your family, she said, like that word was a skeleton key she could wave around to unlock anything she'd locked me out of. You told guests I was too sensitive for my own birthday, I said. Now you remember me? She flinched like I'd slapped her. Not a full-body jolt, just the eyes, narrowing, then darting to the nearest exit. But she stayed quiet. Dad cleared his throat and took over like it was a business meeting. Let's not dig up old wounds. You've clearly done well for yourself. Maybe we all did something right. You want to thank you? I asked. For pretending I didn't exist while you funded a car and a party under my name. He sighed and said, You're here. That means we didn't fail. That line. Like he thought he had a share in everything I'd bled to build. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You opened a line of credit in my name the summer I left. That wasn't helping me. That was theft. Mom blinked, slow and deliberate, like she was forcing herself not to react. Dad tilted his head like he was being patient. I don't recall the details. Those were complicated years. Then he looked at Grant, like his golden boy might tag in and fix the mess. Grant stepped forward, his voice low. Mace, I wrote you that night. You never answered at 1 a.m, I said. After the party was over. After the car and the cake and the banner with your name in lights. You called me dramatic when all I asked for was a seat at my own table. I never called you dramatic, he said quickly, but his eyes flicked sideways. I still have the text, I said. Word for word, you said, Mom says you're being dramatic. Where are you? That shut him up. He looked down at the floor and stayed there. Mom went for the tears next. She even softened her voice. We were trying to protect you. Crowds made you anxious. I laughed once. Sharp. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting the photo ops. You didn't want me in the background freezing up while Grant smiled for the neighbors. Dad tried a different angle, voice flat. What would it take for us to move forward? I stared at him. You really think this is a negotiation? I think we're trying, he said. This is hard for all of us. I looked around. We were in the middle of a children's hospital. Kids passing through, volunteers, Carla down the hall talking to someone about scheduling, a wall with my name on it less than 20 feet away. You want to move forward? I said. Start by admitting, in front of these people, what you did. Mom whispered, don't do this here. This is exactly where I do it, I said, because this place helped me fix what you broke. Grant shifted his weight. I'm sorry, he mumbled, but his eyes were still glued to Dad's face, watching for approval. That told me everything. I pointed to the wall near the studio entrance. Photos of donors, volunteers, kids with toolboxes. Eli's name was on a small placard near the bottom, listed under community contributors. That kid helped me build this, I said. He didn't share my blood. He showed up. That's more than I can say for either of you. Security had drifted closer by then. Nothing dramatic. Just one guy by the door, another near the volunteer desk, watching. I didn't call them off. I wanted Dad to feel it. The pressure, the weight. And then Denise stepped through the side hallway with a black tote bag over her shoulder. She moved like she already knew what was coming. She pulled out 2 folders and placed them on the table behind me. Calm, clean, practiced. One folder had credit line statements. Every charge tied to my name. Catering invoices, car rentals, luxury events. The other folder had photos. One in particular, me standing on the deck, just barely visible behind the glass while everyone cheered for Grant and his brand new Audi. Dad opened the folder and flipped through the pages without saying a word. His mouth got tight. His eyes didn't blink. When he got to the photo, he froze. Mom looked at Grant like he was supposed to fix it, but Grant had nothing left. Just guilt sitting on his shoulders like a sandbag. I'm not asking for money, I said, stepping closer so they could hear me clearly. I'm not suing you for damages. I'm not dragging you through court. What do you want then? Dad asked, voice sharp. I want you to stop pretending you didn't choose him, I said. I want you to stop lying to yourselves. I cleaned up your mess. I paid the debt. You don't get to walk in here and act like we're equals just because I survived it. No one spoke. People in the hallway had started to slow down. No one said anything loud, but they noticed. Word gets around in places like that. Mom opened her mouth, but Denise raised a hand. We're done here, she said. Unless there's a legal matter, this meeting is over. Security didn't need to step in. They just stood tall and stared until my family got the message. Mom turned first. Grant followed. Dad waited a few extra seconds, scanning the hallway like he'd left something behind. Then they walked out the way they came in. I watched the door close. That was the only sound I needed. A week after they walked out of New Hope without saying a single damn thing that mattered, Denise called me again. Check your email, she said. This one's worse. I opened the PDF and stared at it for 10 minutes without moving. It was a vehicle lease, luxury SUV, tinted windows, top-tier package, signed in my name. The date on it was 2 years after I left home. The signature was shaky, like someone had tried to copy my handwriting from memory. The address listed was one I hadn't used since high school. And the social security number, mine, clear as day. Denise's voice came through the phone like a drill bit. Your father's firm filed the lease. The billing trail runs through 3 holding companies, but it ends at their business address. I rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand. He signed a car in my name while telling everyone I ran away, and used it for client events according to the logs. There are valet slips attached to dinners with state representatives and potential investors. The mileage logs match his calendar. I didn't even get mad right away. It was like falling into a cold pool. Your brain just shuts off and stares at the bottom. I said, send me the affidavit. Let's file. The next day, while I was in the shop sanding down a walnut bench for New Hope's parent lounge, my phone buzzed again. This time from a guy I used to know back in Little League. The message just said, you see this? I clicked the link and got hit with the next left hook. Grant's face, grinning in studio lighting, front and center on a podcast thumbnail that read, Leadership Through Pressure: How an Only Child Built Resilience. I pressed play. 10 seconds in, I froze. Grant told the host, "I'm an only child, and I always had to carry all the weight." It taught me to work twice as hard to make my own success. I didn't break anything. I just sat down at my desk and watched the clip 7 times in a row, like I was trying to understand a language I didn't speak. Then I forwarded the link to Carla. No subject, no message. She called an hour later. "Do you want us to respond or ignore it?" I said, "Set the boundary. Be clean. No drama." That same day, New Hope's PR team put out a 2-sentence statement. "Our donor's story is his to tell. We won't share details, but we will protect our kids and our staff from harassment." That shut most of it down. A few nosy emails came through, but nothing caught fire. Carla ran interference like a pro. Tessa showed up that night with Thai takeout, tossed the bag on my bench and said, "You want to burn them down? I'll hold the can." I laughed harder than I'd laughed in days. That kind of loyalty? You don't buy it. You earn it by bleeding in front of someone and letting them stay. Eli came in the next morning, dragging a little heavier than usual, and pulled something out of his backpack, a folded-up newspaper clipping. He taped it to the wall above the tool bench, right between a safety chart and a blueprint sketch. It was a photo from the local paper, me crouched next to a kid, showing him how to hold a rasp without chewing through his knuckles. The caption read, "Writer builds safe space for creative work." Eli stepped back and looked at me like he was checking for permission. "You good with that?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, that one can stay." I buried myself in the build calendar after that. Let my hands do the work while my brain stayed locked down. I stopped checking headlines, stopped reading texts unless they came from 3 people, Carla, Tessa, or Denise. But I signed the affidavit, made it official. Denise said the SUV lease crossed an actual legal line this time, not just moral. "You're not just holding a grudge anymore," she said. "You're protecting your name." That line stuck with me. Protecting my name. Not burning theirs. Just keeping mine clean. A few days later, I came back from a supply run and found an envelope on the shop stool. No return address, no label. Inside was a glossy 5x7 print, Grant at 18 standing in front of the Audi, holding the keys up like a trophy. But it wasn't the obvious part that got me. In the window reflection behind him, barely visible in the corner, was me, on the deck, half hidden by the frame, shoulders tight, face turned just enough to see the look. On the back, in Mom's handwriting, it said, "We see you now." That was it. No return address, no apology, no phone number, just those 5 words in ink. I stared at it for a long time. Couldn't tell if it was a peace offering or a dare. I dropped it into an envelope and sent it to Denise with no note. She filed it under communications received. I didn't put it on a wall. That one didn't belong in the shop. Denise called it clean leverage. No trial, no headlines. Just pressure applied where it hurt and paperwork stacked deep enough to block every exit. We settled without a court scene. They paid back every dime tied to my social. Full penalties, plus interest. No dragging it out, no discounts, no negotiating on what was necessary. Denise made sure of that. Then came the part that actually mattered. They cut a check, through their firm, not personal accounts, for a new scholarship fund at New Hope. I picked the name myself. The other kid Grant forgot scholarship. Denise looked at me when I told her. "That's pointed," I said. "That's the point." New Hope softened it like I figured they would. Cleaned it up into the Ryder Fellowship for Overlooked Youth. Same money, same mission. I could live with it. Part of the agreement required a public statement, not a spin job, not some vague regret language, just a printed admission. They wrote, "We acknowledge that we misused a family member's identity and accept full responsibility for past mistakes." That was it. No excuses, no backpedaling, no weasel words. Dad tried to tag on a paragraph about family reunification and healing going forward. Denise cut it like fat from a joint. She told them, "He didn't ask for a reunion. He asked for accountability. I didn't even read the full draft. I just waited for her to give the green light, then moved on with my day. That night, Grant emailed me. It wasn't short. Looked like it took him an hour, maybe 2. Probably rewrote it 3 times. He said Mom blamed herself now, said Dad still wouldn't say anything out loud, but kept circling the news coverage like it owed him something. He told me he'd been carrying water for them since we were kids and didn't know how to stop. He ended it with, "If you ever want to grab a beer, I'm around." I stared at that line longer than I want to admit. I thought about June 3rd, thought about the garage, the Audi, me on the deck with my hands in my pockets while the whole town screamed for someone else. Then I thought about Eli, sanding a block of cedar next to a girl with leg braces, showing her how to keep the grain smooth without burning the edges. She held it up after and said, "It's the first thing I ever made that didn't break." That was the difference. 2 days later, I answered Grant. "No beer. Do better. That's all I've got." I didn't wait for a reply. The settlement money? I didn't need it. Business was fine. I had jobs lined up into next spring, and the shop fund was steady. I took the full amount and put it straight into the kid shop at New Hope. New tools, more hours, better gear, no fanfare. I built a bench from reclaimed oak and aluminum pipe, stained it deep brown, and screwed a nameplate into the side. For the man who sold me my first hand plane and asked for nothing but sharp blades. It sat under the east window with perfect light. That was enough for me. A week later, Carla pulled me aside after a planning meeting. "The board wants you to speak at the gala," she said. "Just a few minutes. You don't have to make it fancy." I told her I hated microphones. Always had. She smiled. "You don't have to like it. Just stand up and say the truth. That's what people remember." I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. She nodded. "Good. You've earned the mic." The podium wobbled slightly when I set my notes down. Not that I was going to look at them. Rented hall, bad carpet, folding chairs lined up like they were afraid of each other. Someone was tuning a guitar in the back corner while a kid dropped a cupcake and burst into tears. Real classy event. I didn't care. I wasn't there to impress. I looked out at a room full of people I didn't know. Donors, board members, a few politicians with teeth too white for their skin tone. I cleared my throat once. The mic squealed. Then it settled, and I started. I used to be the kid who stood outside his own life and watched other folks clap. That line landed harder than I expected. A few people stopped whispering. A woman in the front row blinked slow, like she knew exactly what I meant. "I'm not going to give you a story about beating the odds. I'm not a miracle. I'm not a genius. I didn't get lucky, and I damn sure didn't get handed a car with a bow on it." A few polite chuckles. I didn't smile. When I was 18, I learned what it felt like to be edited out. Not just forgotten. Cut, clean, like I never belonged in the first place. I didn't name names. No need. Anyone paying attention could connect the dots. That wasn't the point. What saved me wasn't family. It wasn't some guardian angel. It was work. It was people who didn't share my blood but showed up anyway. A guy who gave me a cot in the back of his shop. A bartender who slid me food when I was down to $6. A kid who swept my floor before he knew how to hold a hammer. I paused. Let it sit. The first thing I built that mattered was a crooked little stool, sanded too thin, wobbled on tile. But I gave it to a kid at New Hope and he said, "It's the first thing I ever made that didn't break." Folks laughed. Light. Honest. Then quiet again. I didn't come here tonight to make you cry or clap. I came here to say something simple. I looked around the room, found Carla near the wall, arms crossed, watching me like she was ready to yank the cord if I veered off course. "This fund we built, it's not for the kids already getting clapped for. It's for the ones who never got the invite, who stood in the hallway, holding their breath, waiting for someone to remember they were part of it too." More silence. No one fidgeted. Even the band stopped tuning. I don't believe in revenge, but I believe in proof. And sometimes, the only payback you need is proof. Proof you're still here. Proof you did the thing they said you couldn't. Proof you made it even if nobody clapped. I stepped back from the mic. That was all I had. People stood and clapped anyway. I didn't ask for it. Didn't need it. But I let them. After, a man about my age pulled me aside near the punch table. "My brother got all the attention too," he said. "Took me 30 years to take my life back." We shook hands. No big moment. Just two guys who'd lived the same bruise. Tessa found me by the stairs and hugged me like she thought I might collapse. "Now eat something," she said. "You look like you forgot how." I grabbed a plate of cold chicken and sat next to Eli while he scrolled through photos on his phone. "Got one," he said, and flipped the screen to show me. A shot of the two of us standing under the new studio sign. The Ryder Studio for hands-on healing. My arm across his shoulder, both of us smirking like we got away with something. "You better print that one," he said. "Frame it too." "Yeah," I said, "I will." On the way out, I passed a couple who looked familiar. Neighbors from the old street. The woman squinted at me like she almost had it. The man gave me a polite nod, trying to place the face. I nodded back. That was enough. I'd said what I needed to say where it counted. The rest could stay buried. If your family erased you, confront them publicly, or cut ties quietly. Comment your take. If you liked this story, subscribe and like. One click for you, huge for us.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.